Shalom, Nation of Israel. This is Barzal coming in the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai Bahashem, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone until hopeful light pushes word in truth and sincerity across the four corners of the earth. This is a quick one titled, The Day of the Lord is Near, right? Or you can say, the bear is coming, or the bear is coming. I can say that too. Anyways, fair use, fair use, fair use. I do not own these clips, nor is this used for any type of monetary gain. My page is not monetized. This is just for educational purposes only. Fair use, fair use, fair use. So let this clip play. It's kind of long, but I'm going to just let it play and then show the scriptures after. Because he's saying a lot of stuff. He's saying a lot of stuff. And obviously, everything, the main thing we're waiting for is the MOTB, but there's a lot of other prophecies that still have to happen. The MOTB is the major prophecy, but there's still other big prophecies that have to happen, right? You got famine of the word, right? You're going to have, you got famine of the word, and also you're going to have famines, you're going to have plagues, you're going to have pestilences, you're going to have apparitions. There's a lot of other shit that has to happen because those are still prophecies. Those are things that are said before. So those things haven't happened yet, right? But the main prophecy, right, the big prophecy is the MOTB, because once that happens, things should move fast, right? Things should move fast. But the nations coming around America, which is Babylon the Great, that's a prophecy too, right? Jeremiah 50 and 51 and Ezekiel 38, right, and 39 too. You go into that, but that's more like back to Jerusalem. But anyways, let's let the clip play.
His alienated partner. Russian warships have arrived in Venezuelan waters, not for a ceremonial port visit, but as a calculated act of geopolitical signaling. This is not simply about naval maneuvers or the projection of maritime power. It is a direct challenge to 2 centuries of American dominance in the Western Hemisphere, a challenge to the very premise of the Monroe Doctrine itself. Since 1823, Washington has regarded the Americas as its exclusive sphere of influence. That assumption that the Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States is now being openly contested. Moscow's naval presence in Venezuela is more than a show of force, it's a response. It is Russia's answer to decades of NATO expansion eastward, to missile defense systems built along its borders, and to what the Kremlin views as a relentless campaign of Western encirclement. For Venezuela, the stakes could not be higher. Sitting atop the world's largest proven oil reserves, the country has become the flashpoint for a much broader contest, one that will determine who sets the rules of global order in the 21 stone century. Washington's playbook of sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and threats of intervention has failed to produce the regime change it sought. Instead, it has driven Caracas deeper into strategic partnerships with Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran. This moment is not about a few Russian ships anchored off the Venezuelan coast. It's about the unraveling of an entire world order. The slow erosion of unipolarity and the rise of a multipolar system where American power is no longer uncontested. To understand how we reach this point, we must trace the roots of this crisis, because nothing in geopolitics happens in isolation. The Russian fleet in the Caribbean is not an isolated event. It is the culmination of decades of American policy. A policy that has alienated partners, emboldened adversaries, and pushed the world toward a new and uncertain balance of power. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States stood at the height of its global influence. It was the sole superpower, victorious in the Cold War, unchallenged militarily, economically, and ideologically. Many in Washington believed that history itself had ended, that liberal democracy and market capitalism had triumphed once and for all. The question then was simple. What would America do with its unprecedented dominance? In the euphoria of the early 1990s, American policymakers faced a historic opportunity. The Soviet Union was gone. Russia, newly independent and struggling to define its identity, was reaching out to the West. The world was ready for a new security framework, one built not on confrontation, but on cooperation. We could have chosen to integrate Russia into a shared European architecture to craft institutions that reflected the realities of a post-Cold War world, but we didn't. Instead, we chose dominance. Rather than extending a genuine hand of partnership, we expanded the very military alliance that had been created to contain the Soviet Union.
And that was the mistake right there that America did. And that's the hubris of Edomites, which they're the Romans. Same shit that Rome did. Part of the reason why Rome fell outside of the what do you call that? They fuck with the coins. There's a specific word for that, but pretty much they mixed the coins with inferior metals and they brought down the value. The same thing that's happening right now. The value of their coin, the denarius, I think that's what's it called, it dropped because they're mixing inferior metals. The same thing with the money right now. The value of the money is dropping. So that's part of the reason why the kingdom collapsed. But also the other part is because they stretched they stretched too thin. They were trying to expand too fast, right? That's part of the reason why they fell too. Right? So their quick expansion was actually led to their downfall. And the reason why they expanded really quickly is because of their pride. The reason why they mixed the metals, the gold or the coins with inferior metals is because of their pride. They really thought it was going to work. They really thought that they were just going to keep going and keep thriving and things were just going to continue. And that shows in the scriptures where they say that they believe that their places are going to continue. Roughly paraphrasing, you know the scripture I'm referring to. Anyways.
NATO, once confined to Western Europe, began its march.
Oh, and also Slovakia. The reason why that they also didn't stretch out their hand with Russia because that was this prophecy. The Most High didn't want that to happen because down the road, the bear, which is Russia, is going to come and kill you. He's going to come to you with his alliance of nations and take you out. That's why that partnership wasn't supposed to happen. That shows you, like I think it's Daniel 4:17. It says, roughly paraphrased, that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and He give it to whoever He wants. Roughly paraphrased, right?
First to Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, then to the Baltic states, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. Each new wave of expansion was sold to the public as an extension of democracy and security. But to Moscow, it was a slow-moving encirclement. There were warnings, serious, informed, and prophetic voices urged restraint. George Kennan, the architect of America's Cold War containment strategy, called NATO expansion the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War.
And yeah, so Russia's seen that as like, you guys are just trying to take our territory. You don't want peace. You still want war. You guys want to annihilate, and like you want to erase us from history. So you're taking all these countries around us you're slowly encroaching, right, or creeping into our territory. That's what they were doing. That's what America was doing. They tried to play off, oh, we're just doing this. We're just helping other nations. No, that's not what you're doing. So you thought Russia was stupid. They thought the bear was asleep in hibernation. The bear wasn't asleep. He was just watching and he was waiting. So he was going to plot now. Now he's plotting. And that's the problem with people that are prideful. They're blind. They're blind to their own pride. That's why pride is a double-edged sword that eventually kills you, right? The Most High says pride comes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So anyone that's prideful is eventually going to be taken out. You're going to die. And you're not going to see it coming. So that's why America, that whore, that arrogant, prideful, haughty whore, that witch, that harlot, right? That bitch, she is going to be taken in a way that she doesn't suspect. These nations are going to come around, join. Other nations that are allies with America they're going to be the nations shooting on her too. It's not going to be just the ones that they know that are their enemies. It's going to be the ones that are their allies right now. They're going to turn on her. They're going to turn on that whore and they're going to shoot missiles on her. And she, like the scripture says, I think it's in Sirach 23. It says, roughly paraphrase, it's somewhere in Sirach. I think it's Sirach 23 and 17 or 21. It says that, roughly paraphrase it says, that man shall be punished in the streets, and where he suspected not, he shall be taken. Because they believed that they were doing all these things, and no one was seeing all the wickedness that they're doing, all under the shadows, or what they were thinking in their minds, what they're really trying to do. And the Most High sees everything, and He decides what goes and what doesn't go. So with America, your time's done. Your kingdom's not going to continue, right? Even though you want it to, and even though you want to believe it to, just because you believe the sky is orange doesn't mean it's orange. You can tell yourself it's orange all day long, but the reality is it's blue. So that's the real reality, and you're gonna wake up to it, whether you like it or not. So America, which is Babylon, which is Nineveh, which is spiritually Sodom, which is spiritually Egypt, right? Which is, you can say, spiritually Rome too, or spiritually Greece, is done. It's done, right? They're on their last breath. You know.
He understood something Washington refused to accept, that Russia, regardless of who led it, would view the arrival of NATO troops on its borders as an existential threat. The pivotal moment came in 2008 at the NATO SU, MIT and Bucharest. There, the alliance announced its intention for Ukraine and Georgia to eventually become members. For Russia, that was a red line crossed.
And Slovakia, and that's why in war you don't leave your enemy standing, right? In war, what was the most likely what he say? He says kill the sons, the men, and even the old women, but take the daughters, the little girls, right? Because if you leave the men around, they're gonna plot, they're gonna scheme, and they're gonna come back to fight you again. You think they're just gonna sit there and just let you do that to them and just walk away? Yeah, right. Especially if you didn't put them in captivity. So you just did that to them. You destroyed their kingdom and you walked away. You didn't even put them in captivity. What do you think is gonna fucking happen? They're gonna come back and fight back. That's how you know America's stupid, because they really thought that no one can touch them. That's that pride, that they were so prideful that they just left their enemy there. You know, they didn't destroy them. They just destroyed their kingdom, so to speak, and then they walked away instead of like actually annihilating them. But it was really the hand of the Most High, the hand of Yahweh Yahushai, right? And that's why all these countries that America went to the country, they invaded, they put their democracy, they took the resources, they really should just wipe them out. That's really what they should have done. And that's why that your laziness, or your hubris is going to bite you in the ass, because if all those countries that you went and raped, they're now have been building their resources, buying weapons, making alliances with your enemies, and they're going to come back and kill you. And that's why when you have an enemy, you wipe them out. You don't sit them and let them get their strength and plot and scheme. You don't do that. That's not the art of war. Which shows you America's just fucking stupid. And this is why I keep saying Edomites are not smart. They're not smart people. They're really fucking stupid. Remember their ancestor. Remember what the ancestor did. He sold his birthright for food. Right? He sold his birthright for food. That's who the ancestor is. So I don't know why you would think that they're smart. Yeah, the scriptures say, he's wiser than Daniel, but he's wiser than Daniel. We are wiser than Daniel. So his intelligence stops at Daniel. That's where he stops. Daniel is wise, but we're wiser than Daniel. Because right now we're in a time of knowledge. It says the scriptures say knowledge shall increase. Anyways.
Ukraine is not just another neighboring state. It is the historical and cultural heart of Russian civilization. The first Russian state was born in Kyiv. The notion of NATO missile systems positioned just a few hundred miles from Moscow was intolerable to any Russian government, liberal or nationalist alike. But Washington pressed on, convinced that Russia was too weak to respond, too dependent on Western institutions,
You see?
too constrained by
That's
its
the pride.
internal chaos. We believe that history itself was
Let me just rewind that.
just a few hundred miles from Moscow was intolerable to any Russian government, liberal or nationalist alike. But Washington pressed on, convinced that Russia was too weak to respond, too dependent on Western institutions, too constrained by its internal chaos. We believe that history itself was on our side, that our model of global leadership was inevitable and irreversible. It was a fatal miscalculation.
You see? And I didn't even know he was going to say that, because this is my first time watching the whole video. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't even know he was going to say that. That's literally what I just said. It shows you it was a pride. The pride, the arrogance, the hubris, the haughtiness got to them. Right?
What happened next in Europe would soon echo in the Americas.
Right? The pride of thy heart has deceived thee. Thou that dwells in the cleft in the rocks. That's what pride does. It deceives you. It makes you think something that's not real. Anyways, Ezekiel 38 and sorry, 2. It says, NLT, Son of man, turn and face Gog of the land of Magog, the prince who rules over the nations of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. That's referring to Russia. Give him this message from your sovereign Lord. Gog, I am your enemy. I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws to lead you out with your whole army, your horses and charioteers in full armor, and a great horde armed with shields and swords. Persia, Ethiopia, so Persia's Iran, right? If you don't know, Ethiopia is still the same name. Ethiopia, Libya will join you too with all their weapons. Gomer and all its armies will also join you, along with the armies Beth Togarma from the distant north and many others. Right? So a whole company of nations are going to come against America. Get ready, be prepared, keep all the enemies around you mobilized, and take command of them. A long time from now, you will be called into action. In this distant future, you will swoop down on the land of Israel, right, or Yasharallah, which will be enjoying peace after recovering from war and after its people have returned from many lands to the mountains of Israel, right? Oh, Slakia, what just happened? You and all your allies, a vast and awesome army, will roll down on them like a storm and cover the land like a cloud. This is what the sovereign Lord says. At that time, evil thoughts will come to your mind, and you will devise a wicked scheme. You will say, Israel is an unprotected land filled with... No, that's Slakia. So this is where it's a bad translation. So go to KJV. It says, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. That's referring to America, right? Because there's no walls between their villages. Their villages like their states. There's no actual wall like warding off. Okay, this is this village, that's that village. It's just open. You just can just drive into another state, right? I will go to them that are at rest. So them that are at rest are the ones that are at rest. They're living comfortably. The scriptures talk about America being that the virgin daughter of Babylon, right? And the reason why she's a virgin because she's never been penetrated. She's never been penetrated from any foreign invaders. That's why America's referred to as that, which is why they're called Babylon. But America's never been penetrated by foreign invaders. Yes, there were 3 wars. There was a Spanish War, English War, and one more. There was a Spanish War, English War, and there was one more war, a French War. They were fighting over the colonies in America, but it was never called America at that point. It was never called the United States. It was still kind of like a land that they were fighting over, you know? When it actually became America, they never had any foreign invaders or any wars like that. So you just kind of have to go into history for that. But it says, and thou shalt... Yeah, I'll read from 10. It says, thus saith the Lord Yahweh wa Yahushai, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, you see, and having neither bars nor gates. Exactly. They don't have any walls separating themselves from each village, which normally you do. Ancient times, you didn't have the village wasn't just open, like you can just walk into the village. There's walls. Like then people come to the gate, they're like, who are you? Right? Or, oh, I'm coming to see so and so. I know this man in that village, and then they let you in, right? That's how it was. But in America, it's not like that. You can just drive into this state, you can drive into that state, you can drive into this village, you can drive into that village, you can drive into that city, you can drive into that city. You're just free, open, right? Yeah, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle, goods that dwell in the midst of the land, right? And that's why America is referred to as a melting pot, you know? Verse 13, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all the young lions thereof shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take great spoil? I'll just jump to 15. And it says, and thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee. So that's referring to like Russia, the north parts. All of them riding upon horses, a great company and a mighty army, right? So you can see that, you know, that's what's happening right now. That's what's happening right now. So the next one I'm going to go to real quick, Slakia. So Joel 2. So Joel 2, it says, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains of great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall it be any more after it, even the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape. So it's referring to the day of the Lord. You know, you got the missiles that are going to be shot onto America, right? The missiles are going to be shot there. So I just wanted to talk about that real quick. Because this is what this is all going to lead to for America. They're going to eventually get wiped out. It's going to be a desolate land. So Zephaniah 1 and 15 says, Zephaniah 1 and I'll read 14. It says, the great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord, the mighty man shall cry there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Right? So it's going to be complete destruction. Right? So when those missiles hit America, being shot from all the missile silos from all the different nations, you know, there's no coming back from that. And that's what the scriptures say. Pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. You know? So you can see that they did the exact same thing the Romans did. Exact same thing, because they're the same people coming back. That's why Trump is called Nero 47. You know? Anyways, that's it on that. Like to close up by saying, Kahala Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai Bahashim Recha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of the Great Millstone and to the hopeful like pushers word and truth and sincerity across the four corners of the earth. Abad Babal, Kwam Yasha Allah, and Shalom.